Well, hello, Life Group leaders. I hope that you all are doing well this week. Hey, we are jumping into Deuteronomy chapter 6, one of the most important passages in the entire book of Deuteronomy for sure. One of my favorites in all of the scriptures, especially how it touches on ministering to the next generation. And so, if you are a leader of a class with parents in it or grandparents in it, this is just about all of our classes, even future parents in it. This is a lesson that we as the church have to recognize, believe, and adhere to because this passage right here shapes how we raise our children. It shapes how we minister to the next generation, and it shapes who the church is going to be in 20 years from now. And so, if we want to be men and women that leave a legacy of faithfulness, who leave our church better than we found it, who leave our nation in a more godly state than whenever we were born into it, it all begins by understanding the depth and the beauty and the weight of the commands given in Deuteronomy chapter 6. Make no mistake, even though the book of the Deuteronomy is law given to the people of Israel, we would be foolish to miss the principles, the eternal truths that God is seeking to communicate. And we're going to see three of those very clearly here in this passage. And so this is Deuteronomy chapter 6. We're going to look at verses 1 through 9 and 20 through 25. And so we're going to read through it, break it down for you. But before we do that, just to recap, as we've just recently shifted from Numbers into Deuteronomy, we need to know where we are now. You see, the people of Israel, if you recall way back in Exodus, they got to the threshold of the promised land, but they didn't enter in, right? They sent in the spies at Kadesh Barnea. They saw that the cities were walled, the people were strong, and out of fear and lack of trust in God, they refused to enter in. And so as God's punishment for this unfaithful generation, because he didn't want to begin his nation of Israel with a people who wouldn't trust him, he sentenced them to wander the wilderness for 40 years. 40 years until that entire generation of faithlessness died out. And a new generation of men and women who perhaps would trust him would be alive. And so now we are at that place. Now they are prepared to cross over and enter into the promised land. Moses has passed on. Joshua is here. It's time to come and take what God had promised them all those years ago. But before they do that, the law is being repeated. The law is being given a second time, retold to this generation before they cross over, so that they would understand something very clearly. Whether or not they get to remain in the land and experience all the blessings that God has for him depends entirely upon whether or not they're going to obey the covenant regulations that God has given. The terms are very simple. If they will follow God alone, obey his commands, he will be their God. They will be his people. He will dwell among them. He'll protect them. He'll provide for them. They will prosper. It's a really great deal. But what we see throughout Deuteronomy is that the opposite is also true, that if they reject God's commands, if they choose not to obey him, then he will not take care of them. He will not protect them. He will not let them prosper. And so this choice between life and death, between prosperity and emptiness and destruction, is really the people of Israel's to choose. And God has made it incredibly simple. And yet here's what we see through it all. Time and time again throughout the Old Testament, as prophets come, we see them quoting Deuteronomy and referring back to the commands that God had given, pointing out to the people just how far they'd strayed. Because according to those contract terms, if they strayed, what they deserved to get in return was for God to abandon them, leave them, punish them. But even what we see in the law here is that even though that's what they deserve, again and again and again and again and again, God chooses to be forgiving. He chooses to be gracious. He chooses to be merciful. And so we need to understand what the law is, what the commands are, so that we can truly appreciate the depth of God's mercy and kindness. And here today, we really see the greatest command of them all. The greatest and highest calling upon the people of Israel. Their number one responsibility, and then what they're supposed to do with it. And so the first command that we see that could really summarize quite well the entirety of the law, we find it in verse 4 through 6. And here's what it says. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. Now, this is probably a familiar command to you, even if you're not familiar with the book of Deuteronomy. Because this is actually what Jesus says in the New Testament whenever he is asked what the greatest commandment is. He says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself, because this is the fulfillment of all of the laws that God has given them. Now, here's what's so fascinating. I heard it once said by a famous atheist who was on a talk show. He was arguing that religion, Christianity in particular, has nothing to offer the world in terms of morality. His argument was, what command of the Bible is there that atheism wouldn't also command? What command in the Bible is necessary because without the Bible, we wouldn't already want to do it to be a good person? He says culturally and society-wise, it's best if we don't lie. It's best if we don't steal. It's best if we don't murder. He said atheists are superior to the Christians because they don't need to be told that these things are wrong. They don't believe they're wrong because a book says so, but rather because they simply know that they're wrong. But I heard a wise response to that, and it's this. No atheist, regardless of their ability to not kill or steal or whatever it might be, the one command, that's also the most important command, that they fail in, no matter how good of a person they assume they might be, is the greatest command: to love the Lord their God with all their heart, all their soul, and all their strength. Hear this very clearly. It doesn't matter how many good deeds you do, how good of a citizen you are, if you fail to love God. And there is no way to love God if you have rejected his Son, Jesus Christ. And so we have to understand first off and foremost that the highest calling upon every human's life, the reason for which we were created, is to love God. This is the beauty of creation. Is God created us in a way that our greatest fulfillment is when we are getting our most satisfaction from him. Sometimes we like to think that obeying God means suffering. It means having to do things we don't want to do or not doing things that we do want to do. But John Piper says it well, that God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in him. God commands us to love him, but God also created us to love him. And so whenever we choose to love God and we live our lives in a way that is most loving to God, that's also a lifestyle that brings the most satisfaction, the most peace, the most fulfillment to us as well. And that plays out in how we live. And so because this is so critical, what we see here not only is that we need to understand that our number one purpose in life is to love God. Number two, it's that we need to pass that purpose on to the next generation. Number two, this is my point, pass it on. Look at verses 7 through 9. It says, you shall teach these commands diligently to who? Your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Look very clearly at God's design here. He's saying not only is it critical that you, as a godly man, a godly woman, choose to love him with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. But number two is you are supposed to take that faith, that love for God, that memory and rejoicing in all that God has done for you, and you are to teach your children, teach your grandchildren, teach the next generation, whether it's students here at your church, whether it's your neighbor, whether it's your nephew, whether it's a friend down the road, whoever it is, teach them how important it is to love God. This is our duty. This is why we as a children's ministry, well, yes, we're going to teach your kid the Bible every Wednesday and every Sunday that they're here. We're going to have great events. We're going to have lots of fun. And we're going to be faithful to do what we can. But this is why we are constantly putting things in our parents' hands. This is why we are constantly inviting parents to come and be a part of what we're doing. Why we're constantly calling moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas to be the primary discipler of the home. Because nobody has a greater impact on the life of a child than the men and women that are taking care of them. Nobody shapes the future of the church, the future of our country, the future of the world like moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas. Because this is God's design for how men and women are supposed to learn to follow Jesus. And so we talk all the time about the Great Commission, right? To go and make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey all that we have commanded, and baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. This primarily begins in our homes. If we are failing to disciple our young sons and daughters and training them to follow Jesus, we are missing out on Jesus' Great Commission and the Great Commandment given here in the Old Testament. And so that's what we're called to do. And let me just challenge you with this. I would challenge you to ask the men and women in your class, are you stepping up and doing this in your home? Are you making sure that your child knows how to follow Jesus? Are you, dads, are you reading the Bible with your kids? Are you praying with your children? Are you making sure you are getting them in church and modeling for them what a godly adult looks like? Are you living out your faith, and are you actively using all of the opportunities of life to teach that to them? This doesn't mean that all of our moms and dads have to be, these Bible scholars that are doing hour-long quiet times with their kids every day. Look at what it says. It says, you shall teach them whenever you are sitting or walking by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. In other words, it's this idea of using your normal rhythms of life as opportunities to disciple the next generation. Hey, talk to your kid while you're driving them to school. Hey, whenever your kid loses a baseball game, use that as an opportunity to talk about integrity. Whenever your kid gets in trouble at school, use it as an opportunity to show mercy. Whenever your kid, whatever it might be, and just the regular rhythms of life, use those as chances to teach your children about Jesus. Just a great example of this, someone very close to me, they love to take their son hunting. That's something that they're going to do no matter what. Lots of dads, grandpas like to do this with their little boys and girls. But here's what they do. Before every hunt, they take a moment to stop and pray and thank God for the opportunity. And every time they harvest an animal, they pray over it and they give thanks to the Lord for what He has given them and for the chance to do it together. It's little things like that, taking an activity that you're already going to do and using it to point your kids to the Lord. It's not complicated. It takes intention. And what's the secret to doing that? Look at verse 6. It says, these words I command you shall be on your heart. When the Word of God is on your heart, when the desire to love God with all of who you are is already on your mind, it is going to overflow out of you to the people around you. But if you are not being filled up with that love for God, if you are not in the Word, if you're not on your knees in prayer, then you're not going to be able to give your kids, give your family something that you don't have. That's the second challenge I would say. Is first, we talked about using opportunities around you. Number two, I would challenge you. Are you faithfully loving God? Are you filling up yourself and your soul with the presence of God? Because you can't give what you don't have. Well, that's our first 2 points. Third and finally, as we kind of wrap this up, moving over into verses 20 through 25, is this. We are called to remember what the Lord has done. And more than that, we are called to let the world around us know what the world has done. Look at these few verses with me. It says, when your son asks you in a time to come, what is the meaning of the testimonies and the statutes and the rules that the Lord our God has commanded you? Then you shall say to your son, we were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. And the Lord showed us signs and wonders and great and grievous against Egypt and against Pharaoh and all his household before our eyes. And He brought us out from there, that He might bring us in and give us the land that He swore to give our fathers. And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear the Lord our God for our good always, that He might preserve us alive as we are this day. and it will be righteousness for us if we are careful to do all this commandment before the Lord our God as he has commanded us. And so he makes this point. He says, as you are trying your best to love the Lord your God and to teach your children to do the same, there are going to be days whenever your children recognize this and they ask you, hey, why are we doing this? What is it all about? Why do we have to go to church today? Why are we never missing things to be? Why are we having to skip baseball practice to be here on Wednesday nights? Why do we always read the Christmas story on Christmas Eve? Why do we celebrate Easter? Why do we do all of these things that we do that point to God? And when those moments come, look at what he's saying. He's saying, don't miss them. Don't let your children and the next generation forget why we are who we are and why we are where we are. You see, this is the great problem with our world today, is we are living in a society that has forgotten how we got here, that has forgotten its Christian roots. You see, the purpose of this command was that the blessings that this generation was experiencing as they entered into the promised land would continue on from generation to generation, from son to grandson to great-grandson, and so on forevermore. But the way that happens is only if, with each generation, those men and women are faithful to pass on to their kids and grandkids a memory, a recollection of where they came from, of their roots. That's the argument here, saying, don't let your kids forget that at one point we were slaves. We weren't here. We didn't just walk into this land like it's ours to own, but we were slaves, and God's the one that miraculously saved us. We were delivered, and we were given all of this. You see, with each generation, it's easy to forget these things. It's easy to not understand how special what we've been given is, and to take things for granted. I think every generation looks at those younger than them and feels that that's what they do, because this is human nature to forget just how difficult some things were earned and to take them for granted. This is what we're seeing in our culture right now. This is the problem with our society today. You see, what we as Americans have taken for granted is that all of the things that make our culture good are the result of Christianity. In fact, all of Western history, all of the things that make the West so great, so special, that produce such high quality of life, is a direct result of the presence and influence of Christianity within it. We talk about things like inalienable rights, like treating all people as equal, having individual freedoms, even things like the arts and education and things that make our culture so great. All of the good things in our culture are the result of men and women that lived before us that had strong Christian convictions and sought to build a world and a society that was a reflection of their faith. But here's the problem. We've reached a place as a society where we have abandoned those Christian roots. We have abandoned the faith of our ancestors. And what we're starting to see now is the benefits and the blessings that came from a Christian culture are now finally starting to dry up. It's almost as if long ago the culture was Christian and it killed its Christian roots. And now that root has been dead, the rest of the tree is drying up and crinkling up and starting to die. And we're seeing those signs and symptoms all around us in the world today. I mean, just flip on the news for 5 minutes and you can see the direction that things are headed. It's because the lie of secularism has told us that we can have all the good things of Christianity without Christ. That all of these things about freedom, equality, all of these are not the result of Jesus and His Word and His goodness, but rather of us, of our good ideas, of if we just have a good enough government system, if we just have enough rights, if we just have enough democracy, then things are genuinely going to go good. But world history tells us that's not true. I mean, you can look at the Soviet Union or Communist China and see what happens when a nation adopts the view that there is no God and we should rule accordingly. You can see all of the perverseness in our culture today that happens when we say there's no true God, there's no true right or wrong. And let me ask you, in those places where there is no God and there's no recognition that Jesus is king, that morality exists, that there is good and bad, is life better or is it worse? And let me just ask you, we all know the answer to that. And so what does this mean for the future? Do we want our culture and our nation and our communities to continue to go that direction? Or do we want to say, hey, this isn't working. This lie has left us worse than we were before. And you know what? We need to recognize that what God says is true, that his ways are best, and that we need to be a people, a culture, even a country that recognizes that there is only one true standard of right and wrong, and there's only one person who gets to decide what that is, and his name is Jesus. He is the king, he knows what's best, and things go best when we live according to his standard. Now, let me preface it by saying this. We can demand to bring prayer back into schools. I think we should. We can demand for Christianity to be taught in the public square. I think it should. We can demand and vote to put godly men and women in office. I think we should. All of those things are good. And I want to see our country be a Christian nation that recognizes the Lord. But if we are calling for all of those things and not doing it in our homes, we're missing the point. You see, true change comes when we as men and women are faithful to teach those around us what God has done. What are we doing if we want the world around us to change, but we are failing here and now to pass on the memory of all the ways that God has blessed us? I mean, are you teaching your children, hey, this is why we go to church, because this is what God has done for me? Are you teaching your child, this is why that I stay married to your mom or your dad? This is why I treat him or her as good as I do, because this is what God has done for me. This is why I don't do these things, because God has done this for me. This is why we give this money to church, because this is how God has blessed me. Are you teaching your family what God has done and how we behave and respond to it? Or are you just sitting back and letting them assume that all of these things are just how it is, taking it for granted, and not letting them know the glorious, rich past of how God has been merciful to you? Now, we have to pass our faith on. Our kids, our grandkids, they need to know just how good God is and what God has done for you so they can experience it as well. Let me leave you with this, and then we close. We see after the book of Deuteronomy, we flip over to Joshua, and Joshua is really the high water mark of the entire Old Testament. You can see him and this generation, they're faithful, they go into the promised land, they conquer it all, life is good, things are great, they're trusting in the Lord. Then Joshua dies. And we get to the book of Judges. And if Joshua is the high water mark, Judges just may be the low water mark. Because Judges is this downward, disgusting spiral of the people of Israel falling into sin. And here's what happens. We have to ask the question, how does this people go from this great godly nation to this horrible, disgusting, depraved people? Well, let me answer that question for you. Judges chapter 2, verses 10 through 12. It says, Joshua and all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. And there arose another generation after them who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. And the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served Baals. And they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. And they went after other gods from among the gods, the peoples who were around them. And they bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. Israel fell apart and ultimately had to leave the promised land because a generation of godly people failed to pass their faith on. Let that not be us. let that not be us who do that, who give our children and grandchildren over to the gods of this world, the gods of secularism, the gods of adultery and lust and profanity and perverseness and all of the things that are fighting and striving for the souls of your children. No, we have to be men and women who stand up and say, no, this is who God is. This has been what he's done for us. And we need to be a people who love him with all of our heart, our soul, and our strength. And so that's my prayer for our next generation. That's my prayer for every one of those kids that comes through that kids building. And that's my prayer for you as leaders, as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, as followers of Christ, that we would be a people who stand for truth and stand up and call on all those around us to experience the abundant life that is only found when we live our lives loving God with all of who we are. So I hope this has been helpful for you. A little all over the place, but there's a lot to this, and this really touches on all areas of life. And so dig into this text, get the most out of it, and teach it with all your heart. I'm praying for you guys as you prepare. Good luck. God bless.